What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Generation Lyme podcast. My name is Jesse Ruben. If you like this content and our other episodes, please rate us 5 stars, give us a follow, post about us, tweet about us, TikTok about us. I don't know. Is that a thing? You should do that. Anyway, this podcast has been really exciting. The response has been great. And thank you for listening. Today on the podcast, we have a very special guest, one of the co-founders of Generation Lyme. His name is John Donnally. How you doing today, John?
Doing well. Thanks for having me on here.
We are excited for you to be here. On a personal note, I am excited to talk to you today because you are a big part of my recovery and my journey, and we met at a time when I was in a dark spot and really, really sick, and our friendship and our group of friends really helped pull me out of that and was a big reason why I wanted to work with Generation Lyme in the first place. So, yeah, excited for you to tell your story for the folks at home.
Absolutely.
So what we're going to do is we're going to go in chronological order. We're going to basically get your story starting from when you were very little, whatever before Lyme looked like, during, after, and then we're also going to have to talk about the bike trip. John, sorry, John. We're going to have to.
I'm going to feel so old, though. I was so in shape and biking across the country. Could not do that right now. But it was an amazing trip. So,
just as a spoiler, John biked across the entire United States for the sake of Lyme disease awareness, and one of the most incredible things I've ever even seen in my entire life. And I'm excited to get into it with you.
Me too.
So let's just go all the way back. How old were you when this whole thing started?
So hard to pinpoint exactly when, because I was sick for a long period of time before I was diagnosed. But I'd say probably around 9 or 10 years old is when I started getting sick with various things. A lot of sinus infections, ear infections, chronic headaches. And then when I was in middle school, I started getting like really bad arthritis in my neck.
Yeah.
To the point that I was seeing a chiropractor twice a week, swallow an Advil at like 10 o'clock before going to bed.
All right,
wake up.
Let's because we got a
that
lot
accelerated.
We got a lot to cover here. This is already going to be insane. So you're 9 years old. Is there ever a thought when you're that age of like, something is wrong here, this is different, this shouldn't be happening to me? Did you ever like talk to your friends about it when you were a kid that age and just try to figure out what was going on?
I mean, I think you're so young, and it's even hard to remember that far back, but I think when you're so young, it's very difficult to articulate what you're going through, right? So, I did notice that I didn't have as much energy, that my head hurt, that I was getting dizzy and had these various things. And then the neck pain was something like tangible, like, wow, my neck really hurts, Mom. Okay, let's go to the chiropractor. That seems like the obvious thing to do.
But it didn't seem strange that a 9-year-old needed to go to a chiropractor?
I think it did seem strange. And like, that's why we went to the chiropractor. But no one in my family or even any of the doctors that I went to see, like my pediatrician, ever suspected Lyme disease, despite the fact that I had pulled ticks off me more than a handful of times.
So where are you living at the time? Where did you grow up?
So I was in Morristown, New Jersey, which, Lyme disease is a thing there. There are ticks. We'd regularly see deer crossing our yard. But we didn't know anyone who had Lyme disease, really.
Right. So when you're saying that, first of all, it's so funny because I like that word, even just the word tick, I'm like,
Yeah.
But when you're seeing these ticks, when you're pulling them off you, like, is this like a major crisis? Oh my God, we have to figure this out. What is going on? Like, we can't have this. Or is it just like, oh, pull it off, go about our day? Like,
I think it was pretty casual. People knew about ticks and knew that you had to pull them off of you. And of course, if they had been latched on you for more than a few days, then maybe you might get something called Lyme disease. But if you found them early enough, which seemed to be the case when I pulled them off me, then there was seemingly nothing to worry about, which, we now know it is not the case.
It's completely insane.
Right. And then there's also like, unless you get that classic bullseye rash, then you're fine. The tick either didn't carry the Borrelia or it wasn't on you long enough.
Okay. So you're 9 and 10, you're going to the chiropractor. Now you're in middle school.
Yep.
And you're taking Advil all the time. Are you just in pain? Do you ever feel normal in middle school, or are you just constantly in pain? Or do you just think you're in pain and that's normal?
In pain, and it kind of becomes the new normal, especially in 6th and 7th grade. And then at night, it just becomes crushing, right? Like I can't even go to sleep without those Advil. And then I'm waking up again at 3 o'clock to pound more Advil. And my parents are a little bit at their wits' end trying to figure out what's going on here. My pediatrician can't really figure it out. Chiropractor, of course, is 90% sure that it's something structurally wrong with my spine. So we take his word for it and keep going back.
I mean, did you get x-rays? What could possibly have been wrong with your spine at 11, 12 years old?
Degenerative arthritis, they thought, at 10 or 11 years old,
Oh my God.
which is an aggressive diagnosis.
Oh my God.
But yeah, I mean, we just didn't know any better. No one did.
I guess one thing that I want to just pinpoint here, because this comes up a lot in these conversations and with people listening, were your parents were on board with you, it sounds like, the whole time.
Yeah, they were fully on board. They were very concerned. They were looking for answers, but I guess the other part is I didn't have any truly visible manifestation, right? Like I didn't have a big rash on my face or, twitches or something like that. These were all kind of, I mean, they were challenging to get through, but none of them disrupted me from going to school.
Now, are you a good student? Are you on playing sports? Are you?
No, I was tested for ADHD. I was like kind of off the walls. Like terrified of reading out loud during class, like really struggling with my courses. So I was pretty much like a straight C to B minus student at that point in time, and had a terrible time focusing on anything for like longer than 10 minutes.
I mean, it sounds like you're dealing with like anxiety kind of stuff too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just, I was just off the walls, man. I was off the walls while at the same time feeling, pretty sick.
I mean, do you have ADHD, or was that a Lyme disease symptom, you think?
Well, what I can tell you is that after I was treated for Lyme disease with a few weeks of intravenous antibiotics, I was like an entirely different kid. Wow. After that point, went from getting C's to straight A's my 8th grade year. So like you look at these things and it was very tangible, both like the symptoms that I was having with the neck pain,
yeah,
to, just performance athletically, academically. It was night and day.
So, all right. So let's just fill in that gap.
Yeah.
You go from neck pain. I can't believe that a chiropractor said you had degenerative. Okay. So you're doing that. You're in pain all the time. You can't sleep. What happened where suddenly you were getting IV antibiotic treatment?
Right. So I was really sick, feeling unwell, seeing the chiropractor all the time. Started getting low-grade fevers.
This is like 7th, 8th grade?
This is 7th, 8th grade. This is really
That's already a brutal time. Just a brutal age. So tough.
It's, so it's summer going into 8th grade, and I'm feeling really sick. And then all of a sudden, middle of the day, half my face goes paralyzed. Like I walk up to my dad, he's in his office. I'm like, Dad, like I think half my face is paralyzed. Something's wrong here.
Okay.
And that's when he's like, oh boy, we got to go to the hospital. And because that's like a classic Lyme disease symptom, they knew to test for it. And I very fortunately, compared to other patients, tested like off the charts positive for
I
Lyme
mean,
disease.
and when I said this yesterday when we were going over this, the fact that you came in with Bell's palsy and they thought to test you for Lyme, I think is very fortunate, because I think there were probably, especially back then, a lot of doctors who would not have thought to test for Lyme with Bell's palsy.
Right.
So I
Exactly. So I think the Bell's palsy was totally a blessing. And then the fact that I came back positive on that test.
yeah, that's like hitting the lottery, man.
Yeah. I
So
mean, that being said, I was dealing with symptoms for a few years that, people couldn't really put their finger on.
yeah. So now, okay, so you're in middle school, you've got Bell's palsy, you have a positive Lyme test.
Yep.
Then who do you go to? Who did you see? Did they give you treatment at the hospital?
Pretty much day 2 of being in the hospital, they gave me a PICC line, and then I started intravenous Rocephin, which I was on for 3 or 4 weeks, and I was working with an infectious disease specialist in Morristown while going through that treatment.
Were you? Wow, you went 0 to PICC line. Were you in? Did you stay in school? Were you going to school?
This was during the summer.
Oh, lucky you!
So this was over the summer.
Fun little
and-
summer vacation for John.
And I guess I just gotten used to the symptoms, because I remember when they told me I had to have the PICC line in, I was like devastated that I wouldn't be able to swim and I wouldn't be able to go in the ocean. But
Oh my God.
yeah, I mean, within like the first week of treatment was completely brutal. Like I just had no energy whatsoever. I assume just because the bacteria was just dying inside of me. But after the month of treatment, I felt basically like my old self. It's like a cloud had been lifted and I was totally normal kid again.
So now that's beginning of middle school, summer before middle school. I mean high school, sorry.
Summer before 8th grade.
So what was 8th grade like?
Normal. Very normal. Did very well academically, athletically. I got like the most improved student award. And I mean, it's hard to say what was caused by Lyme disease and what wasn't. I mean, I still had very high energy and was bouncing off the walls completely, but I do know I could focus better.
I mean, your grades went up, obviously.
Grades went up. Obviously, I was, because I believe I had neurologic Lyme disease with the Bell's palsy.
Yeah, sounds like it.
So yeah, I mean, I was just an entirely different person from I was the previous year for sure.
So then how was high school?
High
Such a
school
loaded question.
Yeah. High school was normal. High school was very normal. Yeah, I did well. Didn't really have any symptoms related to Lyme disease.
Were you, because I didn't get sick till I was in my 20s. So
yeah.
Were you, when you were in high school, like, did you ever have that in the back of your mind as something that that was this crazy thing that happened? I need to be careful in the woods. Were you still being outdoorsy? Were you still pulling ticks off you at that point? Was this something that you were thinking about a lot? Or was it just like, I feel good, I'm being a kid, I don't care, everything's fine?
I was paranoid about ticks for
Yeah.
sure. I did not want to go in the woods. I didn't want to go on camping trips. If I found a tick on me, I would immediately go to the doctor and be like, okay, let's figure this out, because I do not want to go through that experience again.
How many times did that happen?
Fortunately, I didn't find any ticks on me throughout high school.
Okay.
So that was a good thing. No ticks that I know about, at least.
Yeah.
So I do know I scared shitless of ticks.
Yeah.
But generally didn't think too much about my health, because I felt completely fine after that round of antibiotics, which is, I was very lucky that they gave me the intravenous antibiotics and that I got basically completely better after that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you were in a fortunate situation where I don't know if I've ever heard of even someone with a very positive test at a hospital going directly to intravenous IV PICC line.
Right.
A lot of people, even with a positive test, are getting 2 weeks of oral doxy and being shoved out the door, So
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, was that an option? Was it like we could do oral stuff and then, or we could try this more aggressive treatment, or you were just like, I don't care, give me whatever is going to make me feel better?
No, because we had pushed for oral antibiotics, being like, okay, this seems pretty aggressive, having a PICC line in for 3 to 4 weeks.
You didn't want it.
Well, because infections can happen that way too. So, I mean,
Right.
we were a little concerned, but they were adamant about it. Because I think once you get the Bell's palsy, then they're like, this could be neurologic Lyme disease. Unfortunately, they were literate enough in Lyme disease to know that. So
Where's that hospital doctor? We need more people like that.
This was Morristown Memorial. Yeah, they diagnosed me and started treating me very early. I mean, for a late stage Lyme disease case, I was lucky to get better after that treatment.
So you go through high school, you survive high school, which is hard enough as it is. These podcasts are just me like getting all my emotional stuff about childhood out.
How was high school for you, Jesse?
We don't need to talk about it. So now you're in college. Where did you go to college? Where were you in college and what were you studying?
So I went to Colgate in Central New York, and I studied English literature.
Okay, and you're like cognitively totally fine, nothing weird, normal.
Yeah, I felt very healthy for my first couple years at college.
And
the same as high school.
Then
Old symptoms started coming back: neck pain, migraines, sinus infections. Then I started getting some other things like tendinitis in my Achilles and in my knees.
Was there stuff that when that started happening, did you immediately panic and go right back to, oh no, I'm going to get Lyme again? My symptoms are going to come back? Or did you think it was something else?
No, I kind of chalked it up to, I'm in college. I'm obviously under stress. I'm playing a Division I sport. Injuries are going to happen that way.
What sport were you playing?
I was playing lacrosse in college.
Yeah.
So, and I just kind of dismissed them as daily aches and pains that you go through as you get older. So
as you get older at 19 years old, as you enter
your 20s. So I dismissed a lot of them, and it wasn't until like the really troubling symptoms arrived that I sought medical attention.
And so how was it, like a gradual decline, or was it sort of like over a couple of weeks things got pretty bad?
It was pretty gradual. But by my junior year, I was starting to get like lockjaw whenever I would go to like eat a sandwich or yell. And with that, I'd get this crazy ringing in my ears. And I knew that for sure was not normal.
Okay, so you've got lockjaw, you've got
lockjaw.
Tinnitus.
Yeah,
what else is going on as a 20-year-old in college?
Dizziness, vertigo, tingling and numbness in my fingers and toes. Then I went on a trip to Europe summer going into my senior year, and at the end of that trip, my body basically gave up. All of those symptoms really started ramping up, and I thought, okay, something's wrong here. And I knew of people who had Lyme disease and who had gotten it twice. And that was something that I was going to look into again in earnest, because I simply couldn't get through days feeling that way.
Did you go and see doctors before that Europe trip while you were not feeling well?
I had gone back to see my infectious disease doctor once.
And the original one who gave you the PICC line.
And he said, okay, look, like you might be having a flare-up, or maybe you have a new case. Here's 2 to 3. I think he gave me like 2 weeks of doxycycline, and I took that.
Why wouldn't he give you a PICC line and a month of Rocephin again?
I don't know. He didn't seem to be convinced that my symptoms were severe enough to warrant that sort of treatment.
I hated that answer. But you did also have a doctor that said you couldn't get Lyme twice.
Yeah, that's a doctor that I went to see in Connecticut. And yeah, he basically looked me in the eye, said, you can't get Lyme disease twice, and don't become one of those Lyme wackos. I guarantee if you go, he said, if you search for it, a doctor will treat you with months to years of needless antibiotics. Trust me. Like,
Don't become one of those Lyme wackos.
and he
I hope if you're listening to this, I hope you are one of those Lyme wackos that advocates for yourself when you are very, very sick.
he told me he would give me the 3 weeks of intravenous antibiotics just for my peace of mind, but that I should basically know that it was doing nothing for Lyme disease because it was no longer in my body. And I mean, I didn't really know any better. I hadn't done a great deal of research on my own. But the more research I did do, I kept finding cases where people's symptoms either persisted for years, or they would ebb and flow, or they'd go dormant and then come back. And my symptoms, like, if you're going to say that nothing is wrong with you, or you don't have Lyme disease anymore, okay, fine. Well, then let's get to the bottom of this, because these are really bizarre symptoms, and you're holding a positive Lyme disease test in your hand. So what could it be, right? Rather than just saying, take Advil for the rest of your life and live with these symptoms for the rest of your life, let's get to the root cause of it, right? If it's not Lyme disease, I'm open to that, but let's figure it out.
And what was it like for you, I guess, mentally and emotionally, knowing that you're like dealing with this again for the second time as a young person? Are you like pretty level-headed because you got through it once already? Are you where's your head at in this situation? Because these are tough. Like, these things that you're saying to me, hosting this podcast, like I'm just getting like the craziest medical things that people have ever said to anybody ever. Like,
Yeah.
everything you just said is terrible and like completely dismissive of patients, and which we see all the time in the Generation Lyme community, right? So how did you handle that emotionally? I mean, were you still in school at the time? Did you drop out?
Yeah, I was going back to school that fall. That happened.
So this was in the summer
this was
luckily.
In like August. Yeah, this was in like mid to late August. And I thought, maybe I'm maybe I'm overblowing these symptoms. Maybe it's not such a big deal, right? Maybe this is something that I can live with. And it's possible, these are residual symptoms from a case of Lyme disease I had a long time ago, and it's just something to be dealt with.
Was it something you could have lived with?
No, that would have been a terrible existence. That would have been absolutely awful.
I remember I would, like, 1,000 times a day in my brain, I'd go, okay, if I'm like this for the rest of my life, could I survive like that?
Right.
If I'm like this for the rest of my life, could I survive like that? So, yeah, I mean, the fact that he said that to you, I think, is just crazy. So, obviously, this sounds like something that you couldn't just live with and power through.
No, obviously. It was terrible. Crushing headaches, dizziness, tendinitis throughout the body. Like, it just, was not a reasonable situation.
So you went back to college your senior year?
So I did, but before that, I went on like a Lyme disease nonprofit website and was able to find an LLMD in New Jersey.
So, I mean, I can't even imagine. What year is this? This is a while ago, right?
Yeah, this is summer of 2011.
So how many options were there for LLMDs in New Jersey? 2?
Yeah, like a handful. Like probably 10, right?
Yeah.
And even the one who I went to see was like 45 minutes away from me. So it was by no means like a convenient doctor appointment.
That's hilarious. So you go to you have an appointment with a new doctor,
right?
And you bring in the positive test and just a whole series of symptoms,
right?
And how does that appointment go?
Much better.
Okay, good.
Much better. He also runs his own tests, confirms that I do have Lyme disease, both previous case and an acute case. So he starts me on rounds of antibiotics with supplements. and I feel much better within the first month, and then have lingering symptoms for the next several months. I continue treatment and ultimately get back to a place where I feel like 90% of my previous self, which is like a huge success. But
Yeah.
along the way, I'm connecting with other patients, asking for like treatment tips about what they've
How are
been
you
through.
how are you finding these patients in 2011?
So I went to a support group in upstate New York. Well, I guess you call it central New York. And there were like 10 to 15 people in that group. It was I was the youngest person there by like 20 years. It's like everyone there was
Which is why Generation Lyme exists. Thank you for
exactly.
helping us find our
But
mission
still, I mean, it
statement.
was great to connect with people who had gone through the same thing as you, and just a place to share knowledge and resources. Because at that point, you couldn't really find it anywhere online,
Yeah.
right? It's like, the CDC website didn't really have it. National Health Institute didn't have it. So, yeah, I went to these support groups probably once a month, and connected with patients, and yeah, also met some other people through friends of friends.
Were there things that you noticed that came up a lot in those support groups that we're still seeing is like pretty common? Like were a lot of people in those groups getting misdiagnosed? Were a lot of people getting turned away by doctors, or was that something that was different for you compared to everyone else there?
No, you definitely see common threads, especially like point of initial symptom to the time that you're diagnosed is like years. It's like years that people go getting misdiagnosed by doctors, developing new symptoms. A lot of these people end up getting negative Lyme disease tests. So they think, okay, well, decisively, I don't have Lyme disease. So let's look at these other options. So, I mean, yeah, you just look at the crazy amount of time that people spend searching for an answer, not being able to find it while suffering pretty needlessly.
Was it weird for you to be there as like 20 years younger than everyone else?
Yeah, it was, but I was like, um, I think I was just like desperate for answers.
Yeah. Well, I think we've all been in that situation for sure. Um, okay, so you finished college and now you're 90% better.
Yep.
And what is your life like after college?
Um, pretty normal. I'm living in New York City. I'm working in
Hey.
sales for this technology company. It's like a good gig. My friends are in New York City. Life is great. Um, but throughout my senior year, I knew that I wanted to get involved in Lyme disease just because I was alarmed and like pretty pissed off just about how far behind the diagnostic tests are for Lyme disease, and the fact that patients are being dismissed routinely while going through all this suffering.
Were your
Um,
friends supportive? Were your
yeah,
college
they were
friends
very
supportive?
supportive, very supportive. Everyone was, and like what I came to know is like everyone knows someone with Lyme disease, right?
In central New York, especially, for
Yeah,
sure.
and not just like early stage Lyme disease, but like guys who I played lacrosse with, like one of their brothers had really bad Lyme disease for a number of years and was getting treatment for a number of years and had to take breaks from school and that kind of thing. So you realize that it's much more common, but for whatever reason, these people aren't being connected and it's not being spoken about. So for a while, I thought like I wanted to go to law school and become like a legal advocate for patients. But I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, that's a noble goal, but law school is crazy expensive, and that's
Yeah.
quite a big time and financial commitment. So yeah, I mean, I was sitting at my desk at my job thinking of ways to get involved, and suddenly decided I was going to bike across the country to raise awareness for Lyme disease and raise money for a better diagnostic test.
That was
Very lofty.
that was just a thought that you had while you were. Was there like were you like reading about someone who had done a bike trip? Were you biking a lot? I'm assuming you were biking a lot at the time.
No, no, I wasn't biking much. I mean, I did bike a fair amount as when I was in high school, but not like serious road biking, right? I'd bike to friends' houses, but
That's not the same thing.
no, it's not the same thing whatsoever. And yeah, I discovered that early on in training for the ride. But yeah, I wanted to do something that was big enough in scope to get eyeballs on the disease, and also one that would be able to kind of connect me with patients across the country.
Okay, so you have this idea and you're feeling pretty well, I'm assuming, because if
Have the
you
idea,
weren't,
yeah, feeling very healthy at that point. And
and
so
then you pitch it to some people and you find people who are going to support you.
I pitched it to several Lyme disease organizations, and some of them said no.
We don't
Others,
need to throw anybody under the bus
no, no, no,
here.
no. Some of the, I mean, and rightly so. Like, who is this kid?
Who's
just
this guy? Who's
pitching?
this
Like, he
guy?
just wants to bike across the country and raise awareness for Lyme disease. So I sent my outline and my plan to different nonprofits, and ultimately found Tick-Borne Disease Alliance. And there were just like a few people on that board who were absolutely incredible, and like grabbed onto the idea basically immediately. And like we still know those people, and work with them. I mean, David Roth, Jen Weiss, Nan Kurzman, they were
Who
all
are on
fully
the
who are on the Project
Project
Lyme
Lyme
board,
board,
and are all
of
amazing
which,
people.
yeah,
And they were
shout out
looking
Project Lyme.
they were looking to do something big, because just that would draw attention and help patients and raise money for a diagnostic test. That's what they were really focused on.
So how long between when you pitched them the idea and they said yes, how long between that and when you actually did it?
Like 6 months.
So you trained for 6 months.
I trained probably for 4 months.
And okay, and I have here you started September 2013 in San Francisco.
Yep.
And then how long did it take? Where did you end up, first of all?
So yeah, started at the Golden Gate Bridge and ended in Central Park.
How long did it take you to bike across America?
It took, I think, just over 60 days.
Oh my God. And did you have your route planned out every day, obviously, that you knew exactly where you were going to go and where you were
Yeah.
going to stay and all that stuff?
It was like we had our own RV that was like
Mhm.
decked out in the nonprofit stickers, and it was all branded. And we had the cinematographer with us, we had a driver, and we had basically a logistics person who
And
had created the route and made
how far
sure it
were
was
you
safe.
going every day?
Anywhere from like 50 to 120 miles per day. So it was a lot of biking.
But you weren't just going straight through, right? Like you stopped and met with patients along the way.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when we met, that to me was like the most powerful part of it. Obviously, biking that far is completely insane, and you're a superhero. But the individual one-on-one patient interactions that you had, and meeting with those people, and hearing their stories and sharing their stories, I think. Was there any part of that that really stuck out to you that like you still remember today?
It's very, very grassroots, the whole campaign. And, we met with over 100 patients throughout. And, yeah, I mean, it was a lot of those meetings were just heartbreaking, because you see across the country, people's lives are being crushed by this disease, both the impact that it has on people's physical health and their finances. People spending hundreds and thousands of dollars seeking treatment, and you realize the scope of this thing, right? You can talk about 400,000 new cases of Lyme disease per year, but to actually see that and meet with those people and put a face on it, it was, yeah. I mean, I feel very fortunate while biking across the country, having been able to get my health back after being sick. But for so many people, that it doesn't happen immediately, right? And it requires a lot of treatment, and there's no roadmap for how to get better from, chronic Lyme disease.
Were there any cases of the 100 that really stand? I mean, I feel like I don't know how I've never even asked you this question, but like, is there anyone specifically, like anyone's story that you just like haven't forgotten after, I don't know, almost 10 years?
Um,
No
I mean,
pressure.
yeah, no, I'm remembering, like, I don't want to just pick one story
Yeah.
and like say this one's more important than the others. And
Not more important,
yeah,
but because
or
even
this one sticks out more.
because my wife and I joke that like everywhere I go, there's people have chronic illness. Like
Right.
my Uber driver, person next to me on an airplane in the pre-COVID times when you could go places.
Yep.
So I mean, I've met so many people, and it's like the cab driver whose mom and sister also, they've all been diagnosed with lupus, but they all have Lyme symptoms, and no one's ever brought up Lyme to them. And I just have all of these stories of meeting people randomly where it's just so heartbreaking.
Right. I mean, that did happen a lot of times where we'd pop into a town in like southwestern Colorado and basically be like kind of man on the street, like, do you have Lyme disease? Do you know someone who has Lyme disease?
Yeah.
And it was always like, yes, I have it, or yes, my kid is sick with Lyme disease. And that's how we actually had some of those interviews. But
So that brings up something that I wanted to ask you about, which is, and it's still happening now, where there are so many people impacted by this and so many people that have it, and they're not talking about it, and they don't know, and they don't realize that so many other people have the same thing.
right.
And why is that? What do you think that is?
I don't know. I think there's, I mean, even when you get Lyme disease, I think there's a stigma attached to it, in that, you take your 2 to 3 weeks of antibiotics and then you're better forever. And if you're not, it's because, uh, either something's wrong with you, or your genetics aren't quite right, or you're making it up entirely. And we might have to put you in touch with a therapist because, what you have is not Lyme disease. It's in your head, because you should be better by now, because the because the treatment program that was put together 30 years ago hasn't worked for you.
Yeah.
And also, by the way, on the CDC website, they even say, like, an overwhelming amount of people do not get better after the 2 to 3 weeks of antibiotics. And then they surmise, it could be an autoimmune response to a previous case. It could be your central nervous system. It could be a persistent infection. But in light of all that information, we're just going to give you 2 to 3 weeks of antibiotics. And if you don't get better, then, there's a shrug.
But you see that actually there's a parallel with it with COVID, kind of, where it was like, well, you could have COVID and test negative for COVID and not show any symptoms and still give it to people. So no one should leave their houses. And then you'd see people go, well, we all got tested and we're all negative, so now we're all going to hang out together. It's like,
Right.
The reality versus the information that there's a disconnect there.
Yeah.
And so I'm not surprised by the way that COVID, a lot of what COVID was handled either, because there's information we know, like that it doesn't always work for Lyme treatment, but then we don't actually act like we remember that information. Like I think it's really interesting. And I also would wonder, when we look back on this part of our history, how much damage the phrase "you should be better by now" has caused.
It's odd, man, and it's really frustrating because, I think most doctors know that a certain amount of patients do not get better, and rather than saying to the patient, "Look, there's 20% of patients who do not get better after 2 to 3 weeks of antibiotics. I don't know why that is, and I don't know what treatment it will take to get you better, but know that what you're going through, is not unusual, and
Yeah.
you should continue to seek answers." You rarely get that response from a doctor. At least I rarely got that response. And a lot of the patients I met with while going across the country didn't hear that from doctors. And I think that's something everyone can get behind, right? Someone acknowledging, we don't have all the answers here, and you should absolutely pursue what's going on with you, instead of dismissing
Yeah.
and saying outright, this didn't work for you, so it can't be Lyme disease.
Yeah, I mean, even like your doctor that was just like, this isn't Lyme. Okay, see ya.
Right. And
No trying to get to the bottom of the problem. No trying to solve it. Just, all right, you can go now.
Yeah, you become very tunnel vision. You put like kind of it's just a very rigid approach to it.
So you bike across the country. You meet a super cool, handsome guy like me. This is 2012, 2013. How are you feeling now? How have you been feeling for the last 7 or 8 years? Are you quote unquote back to normal? Are you still dealing with symptoms?
No, I mean, I think still very much back to normal after the trip. Oh, and I do have an answer for you about the patient that stuck out to me most while going across the country.
Yeah.
Brooke Stoddard.
I didn't know that. Brooke Stoddard on the Generation Lyme board.
Brooke tweeted at me as I was going through Philadelphia, and I did like a media interview with one of the local stations there, and he had tweeted, and then I think he reached out to David Roth after that, and that's what connected us. So I think that for me has been the most long-term relationship that's happened from the cross-country bike ride. So if we can go back, edit that into the previous part.
No. We're leaving it in. We're leaving it in. So that's incredible, though. I love that. Full circle. Shout out Brooke Stoddard for tweeting in 2012. So how are you feeling? How are you feeling now? And is Lyme something like? Are you taking a bunch of Are you doing treatments now? Are you? What's your situation today?
I still feel very fortunate and healthy. I'm very like physically active. You know, I still do a lot of biking, a lot of running. I have gut issues that I don't know if it's caused by Lyme disease or antibiotics I took to treat the Lyme disease or what it is, but I do have gut issues that happen on a regular basis. Was also diagnosed with celiac disease, which I don't know if that's in any way related to the Lyme disease. But yeah, I'd say every day, you know, aches and pains happen that may or may not be related to the Lyme disease. That said, I'm for sure at 90%. Feel very grateful for that.
So I understand feeling grateful, but I also know that we're all human. Are there still times where, like, emotionally and mentally it's very challenging? I mean, you've been dealing with this for over 20 years, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely, you know, you always wonder, you know, could I get to 100%, right? What would that feel like? Would it be worth going back and seeing one of these doctors and really detailing a comprehensive plan that is going to fix my gut and my immune system and get me back to that point? But dude, it's like, it's a real commitment, right? I mean, financially, it's a huge commitment to get that sort of help from the experts.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've considered it in the past on days where I'm really not feeling great or can't focus or, you know, have a pounding headache. But I've chosen to, you know, I take the supplements. I live like a very kind of disciplined lifestyle in terms of like nutrition, sleep. You know, I drink alcohol probably five nights a year, 5 special nights a year.
Hey.
And so, I mean, I have made kind of life-changing or lifestyle decisions that
where it's just something that's going to be a part of you for the rest of your life. Basically.
Exactly. I know if I eat the wrong thing or drink the wrong thing, I'll pay for it dearly the next day or possibly the next week.
So I think we're gonna wrap up here. But before we go, I just wanted to know if there was anything that you want to say to people listening that maybe are newly diagnosed, young people they're at different parts in their journey, just anything that you want to say to them that you wish that people had said to you.
Yeah, I mean, the most important part of this is being your own advocate and not taking, you know, you're crazy as an adequate answer. I know that sounds very obvious on the surface, but while you're going through it, it's very difficult to take a step back and look at things analytically and be your own advocate and push for answers to these very real symptoms that you're going through. So I'd say to continue to be persistent and fight for your health, and ultimately you will find the right doctor who can give you a comprehensive plan to get you feeling better, because those doctors exist across the United States. They just might not be the first ones to pop up in your provider search.
Yeah.
But those doctors are absolutely there, and they can make all the difference. And I'd also recommend joining the Generation Lyme meetups. I mean, it's
nice,
for real.
John.
That, like
nice.
Really. It's incredible to be able to connect with people your age who are going through the same experience, who have valuable resources, whether that is, how do I get through relationships with Lyme disease, or what treatment has worked for you guys. Like, it's just a great place to go to for good information and to connect with people. Because I know going through Lyme disease, especially now during quarantine, it's probably even more isolating. Yeah. So I think connecting with people, in addition to being your own advocate and fighting for an answer, those would be my two pieces of advice.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for everything you've done. If you are listening to this, just know that you can make a difference without biking across the country for Lyme disease. But if you do bike across the country for Lyme disease, we'll be pretty excited about that too.
Yeah, if you want to bike across the country for Generation Lyme to spread the word about Lyme disease on our behalf, we'd love that.
We know a guy who can give you some tips. So on behalf of Generation Lyme, once again, my name is Jesse Ruben, and this has been John Donnally. John, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening. If you haven't yet, once again, please rate us 5 stars, follow us, subscribe on all the things. Also, you can check out our brand new website, which is genlyme.org. If you would like to come to a meetup, we have them on Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. We have a women's meetup on Sundays, and we have a parents meetup and a partners meetup once a month, which you can RSVP for on our website. Thank you so much for listening to this. We're going to have a lot more cool podcasts coming up throughout the rest of the year, different interviews with people, roundtable discussions. If you have an idea for a podcast that you'd like us to do, please let us know at our website, and follow us on Instagram at Generation_Lyme. And other than that, stay safe and stay healthy and stay sane. And thanks for listening. Thanks again, John. You're the best.
Thank you.